Okay, so now I've been using these Apods i500 Apple AirPods clones for a while, and this is a short review after using them for real. And I must say that these Apods i500 works great. I was very surprised on how good these are, because they work identical to Apple AirPods when it comes to features and so on, and connections to the phone and all that. They are as great as the Apple AirPods, actually. In fact, the iPhone even thinks that these are real Apple AirPods when you're pairing them. But after you pair them, it says i500 as the name. But that's the only difference actually from the real Apple AirPods when pairing these. And they feels identical to the Apple AirPods in your ears, but even better actually for the comfort, because these are much lighter than the real deal, the real Apple AirPods, because they have a bit worse battery life. And that's why they are a bit lighter than the Apple AirPods. So that means that you can have these in your ears even longer without feeling them, because they are much lighter than the Apple AirPods, and they don't fall out of your ears as easily because they are lighter too. So that's a huge plus with these Apods i500. Another huge plus compared to my original Apple AirPods is that these case have wireless charging, and the wireless charging on these works great actually. The only drawback is that you need to have them exactly placed on the right place on your charging pad, because otherwise they don't start to charge. But you can easily see them start charging by checking out the LED light on the front and also on your charging pad. So after a while you have learned how to do that when you're charging these. And one drawback is the hinge on the charging case. It feels much more loose than the Apple original, and not so great build quality, I think. Maybe it can fall off the case when you drop them on the floor, for example. I think they can break. The hinge can actually break, I think, when you drop these. And that's not so good. My original Apple AirPods I have dropped quite often on the floor, but the case is still working perfectly fine. But I haven't dropped these, so they are still yet working very good. Another drawback is that the latency is not as good as the Apple AirPods, so a bit worse latency. I use my Apple AirPods a lot to watch movies and so on my Samsung TV. I have paired my Apple AirPods with my Samsung TV, and with these ones I can see a bit more latency. The Apple AirPods have almost no latency at all, but with these I can see that the video is not exactly in sync with what I hear when using these. So the latency is not as good, but not so much. So it's not a huge problem actually. They are not so bad when it comes to latency. The battery life then on these, the battery life on the earpieces itself are quite good. You get around two and a half hour of listening time with these, and I have checked that, so I know that's true with these ones I have at least. The case though has not as good battery life as Apple AirPods. You maybe get in total 5 hours of listening time using the case, so that's not so good. I get around 9 hours I think with the Apple AirPods original case. So the case has not so good battery life compared to the Apple AirPods, but that's not so huge problem because you have wireless charging case on this one, so you can often charge them quite easily by just putting them on a charging pad. So that's maybe not a huge problem. But with the Apple AirPods, I usually charge once a week, actually, the case itself. So with these ones, I have to charge about 2 times a week. But as I said, you can always charge them wirelessly, so maybe not a huge problem. But 2 and 2.5 hours of listening times with the earpieces itself, I think that's more than enough. Actually, I think that's really great. The touch control on the back side of the earpieces is both good and bad. I think the touch control is quite good to have when you want to talk to Siri, for example, and so on, and pause and play music and all that. But every time I put them in my ears, because I always hold them there when I put them in to my ears, then Siri activates, and that's not so fun. So Siri always activates when I put them into my ears, and every time I try to feel them and check if they are falling out of my ears and so on, I put my fingers on the earpiece itself in the ear, and then I also sometimes start Siri, and that's a bit annoying. So the touch controls on the back side of them are both good and bad. The microphone itself, when you are talking to someone and with your phone, is also a bit worse than the Apple AirPods original. So they are quite much worse actually, and that's bad. But the speakers itself has very good audio quality, so when you're talking to other persons you hear them quite good in these, and also when listening to music and audiobooks and so on. Maybe a tiny bit distortion when listening to audio. So if you are a really high fidelity music lover, I think you should go for the Apple AirPods instead of these. But when listening to audiobooks and podcasts and so on, as I do, these are perfectly fine for that. So the audio quality is very, very good, but maybe a tiny bit of distortion. So be prepared for that. So all in all, I can say that these are very, very good, and these are very much worth buying. I mean, you can buy 8 pair of these for the same price as Apple AirPods. I mean, that's a fact. You can buy 8 of these, and think about that. You can have 8 for home, 4 in your bag or something, and 4 at work or something, and always have Apple AirPods everywhere you are, fully charged, ready to use, and so on. So by having that as a fact, you can actually see that these are very much worth buying. The Apods i500 is excellent Apple AirPod clones. So personally, I can highly recommend these actually. Even if I have an Apple AirPods, original Apple AirPods, I can actually recommend these. I use them frequently together with my Apple AirPods. I have these in my bags and Apple AirPods always in my pocket and so on. So sometimes I use these and sometimes the Apple AirPods, and they work great. I hardly actually feel or hear the difference when using these. The only I can see which pair I use is because of this LED indicator on the front of the case. That's how I see that these are not my real original Apple AirPods. But if you have Apple AirPods 2 with a charging case, that's more more trouble to see which one to use, because it also have an LED indicator on the front. But anyway, these are worth buying. So go check the links down below in the description text where you can buy these. And I can highly recommend you doing so, because they are great.